Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. Voters in Whitehorse woke up to a new mayor and city council this morning. For candidates and their supporters, there were a few nervous hours while the results came in at Whitehorse City Hall. Katrin Pilkington was there.
Numbers from voting stations across Whitehorse came in incrementally after polls closed at 8 p.m. There was a tense, excited atmosphere in the city council chambers where candidates and supporters gathered to watch results trickle in. By 9 p.m., the count was complete. Mayor-elect Kirk Cameron says he wasn't sure how the night would go.
It was like the last election. I came in sixth place among 6 councillors and just a squeaker at the end of it. So you just never know that outcome. So I wasn't going to throw the hands in the air too early.
Now I'm going to go celebrate.
New councillors are getting used to the results too.
And I'm surprised, and it feels really good. I'm really grateful to have the confidence of the people of Whitehorse, and I'm grateful that they voted for me.
Over 28,000 people voted, and it's an exciting time. I'm happy to be representing folks.
Because, it comes with a lot of responsibility, this job. So, and I take that responsibility seriously. So I'm excited to get started on the training because I know we're going to need some training and then get to work.
The swearing-in ceremony will take place November 1st. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
New mayors were voted in a number of Yukon communities last night. Justin Lachance takes over in Carmacks. Stephen Johnson unseated incumbent Bill Kendrick in Dawson. Two-term councillor Lauren Hanchar won by a wide margin to become the next mayor of Watson Lake, and Michael Riseborough won in Haines Junction. Jack Bowers was re-elected as mayor in Faro, while in Mayo and Teslin there was no race, as current mayors Trevor Ellis and Gord Curran were both acclaimed to another term. The Northwest Territories government is asking Ottawa for permission to borrow more money. The finance minister says the territory's financial situation is dire.
Despite the hard work departments have done to find value for money, the actions taken under our fiscal sustainability strategy have not been enough to absorb the multiple fiscal challenges that have arisen since the tabling of the 2024-2025 main estimates. Efforts to maintain the resiliency of the energy grid, rising costs within the health system, and wildfire expenditures have resulted in our total debt being projected to reach $1.74 billion. As a result, we will breach the $120 million buffer below the federally imposed $1.8 billion limit, as outlined in our fiscal responsibility policy. We are, therefore, in the process of requesting a borrowing limit increase from the Government of Canada. Requesting a borrowing limit increase is necessary to ensure we have the capacity to respond to expenditure shocks that have become more frequent. However, seeking this flexibility in our borrowing room does not mean that we can ease off on our own efforts to ensure fiscal responsibility and sustainability. We will continue to evaluate the value of all programs and services, keep a close eye on public sector growth, and find innovative ways to achieve efficiencies.
This is not the first time the NWT has asked the federal government to increase its debt limit. The current cap is up from $1.3 billion at the start of 2020. Chiefs of the Assembly of First Nations said today they want changes made to a deal to reform the on-reserve child welfare system. The AFN rejected the federal government's $48.6 billion offer yesterday.
Resolution number 1 does not carry, so is defeated.
The AFN wants a new process with a new negotiating team. It voted in favor today of restarting negotiations with Ottawa to get an amended offer. The federal government must now decide whether to do that or make regional deals with groups which favored the most recent offer. Yukon RCMP are searching for a man accused of sexual assault in Mayo. Police responded to a report from a woman who says a man forced his way into her home where he committed the assault. Then the man demanded she drive him to Whitehorse. Police say the woman intentionally drove into a light fixture. The RCMP say she eventually escaped the vehicle and called for help. Police say the woman didn't know the man. The man fled and remains at large. Police believe he could be driving a stolen wildland fire management truck. The government of the Northwest Territories says it's looking at different ways to slow the flow of hard drugs into the territory. The increased use of drugs like fentanyl and cocaine, especially in small communities, has been a growing concern for years. Earlier today, the NWT Premier said his government is looking to make laws that could help police combat the drug trade in the territory. That includes introducing an NWT Safer Communities and Neighborhoods Act, known as SCAN. SCAN laws typically allow authorities to shut down drug dealing and bootlegging operations on the basis of complaints from neighbors.
We are looking at a number of pieces of legislation in the territory to help with that, and the SCAN legislation is one of those. We're also working on a Trespass Act as well as a Civil Forfeiture Act. And the RCMP have expressed their support for these, and they're confident that it's going to help them do their job as well.
Simpson, who is also the Justice Minister, was speaking after a meeting of federal, territorial, and provincial ministers of justice and public safety. The ministers were meeting in Yellowknife this week. Fire season is over in the Yukon for this year. Officials held a press conference today to recap what they call a challenging and unusual season. That's because it started late this year, and most wildfires were caused by lightning.
The fire season didn't really get started until June. For the third year in a row, Central Yukon was the territorial hotspot, with Mayo and Dawson receiving high temperatures and multiple days of heavy lightning activity during June and July. We did see a record number of lightning strikes in a very short duration of time. When it did start, it started hard, and our initial attack crews did an amazing job of initial attack this season. So I would call it an average fire season, but it also posed many challenges. Resources in the wildfire sector are getting harder and harder to come by as wildfires start to become more intense globally. So we now find ourselves not competing, but we find ourselves searching for resources, I will say competing with places like Australia. And it's getting tougher and tougher.
The season saw around 150 wildfires in the Yukon. Dawson City had the most, with 42 fires. All told, 206,000 hectares burned this past summer. The Yukon's Community Services Minister says the fires are a sign of a dangerous new normal.
I want everybody out there today to think about why that's happening. Like, we're dealing with the effects of the pollution we're putting in the climate, but the cause we're not dealing with. And we're seeing that across the country as governments turn their backs on this global problem. And so I think it's incumbent on everybody out there to think about what their leaders are doing to combat climate change. It is very, very important that we actually ask our leaders what they're doing.
Officials also say the Yukon sent more than 200 firefighters to help with fires across Canada and the United States. The NWT government has committed to a more ambitious climate target. It's now striving to be net zero by 2050. The Legislative Assembly made the decision in the summer without any fanfare, but territorial ministers say they won't make it without Ottawa's help. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink has that story.
You know, it's a wonderful target. I'm excited about the target.
But the territory's Minister of Environment and Climate Change also says it's an aspirational goal that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of help.
We're a very small territory. This requires a huge investment from our federal partners.
Becoming net zero is a big promise. According to the latest data, the NWT emitted more than 1,300 kilotons of emissions in 2022, and the goal means getting that number down to zero. Any emissions still being produced in 26 years from now would need to be fully scrubbed from the atmosphere. That can be done through things like planting trees or using technology that actually captures carbon from the the air and stores it. A big part of this will be changing the way the NWT produces energy.
It is technically feasible, so work that was done in preparation and during the course of the engagement last year looked at different ways of achieving it. There is the technological possibility right now today, whether electrification is probably the easiest response.
Wozniak said renewable diesel and changes in energy policy will also need to happen. She, like McDonald, emphasized that the territory can't do it alone. It'll need Ottawa's help. The MLA for Yellowknife North says the NWT will need to embrace the target if it wants mining to be part of its future.
Rio Tinto has already committed to a net zero climate target across its global operations by 2050. De Beers has committed to net zero by 2030. For the critical minerals sector, both private financing and federal government dollars are increasingly dependent on net zero targets. Lazy climate targets are not helping industry. Lagging behind on clean energy makes the NWT one of the least attractive jurisdictions for modern mining.
The NWT government has been mulling over updating its climate target for years now. And now that they've reached a decision, it has to figure out how to actually get there. Wozniak says electrification is one part of the puzzle. Renewable diesel and energy policy are part of it too. She says there will be more answers in the territory's upcoming climate action plan and energy strategy. Leni Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Details were revealed today of a proposed settlement between tobacco companies, provinces, territories, and tens of thousands of Quebec smokers. The deal was years in the making. The CBC's Jennifer Yoon has the details.
$32 billion paid out by 3 major tobacco companies to smokers diagnosed with lung cancer, throat cancer, or emphysema, as well as provinces and territories to recover healthcare costs. If the proposed plan is accepted, it would be the biggest deal of its kind outside the United States.
When we started this case in 1998, not a single person in the world had received a single penny from a tobacco company in compensation. And as a result of this litigation, tens of thousands of Canadians will receive very significant awards.
This is the result of a legal battle that's been going on for decades. The Quebec class action lawsuit was filed in 1998, involving smokers that got seriously sick or couldn't quit. The plaintiffs won the case in 2015. It just took this long for the potential payout because the companies were seeking creditor protection. If this proposed plan is accepted, the plaintiffs would file claims for compensation up to $100,000 each. But many of the class action members have died already, so their successors will be eligible for the compensation.
Obviously, our loved ones won't come back from the dead, but at least it gives us some kind of justice, some kind of closure.
The proposed plan also includes more than $25 billion for provinces and territories recouping health costs, as well as $2.5 billion for smokers in other provinces diagnosed with some cancers between 2015 and 2019. It must be voted on by creditors no later than December 12th and approved by the court. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
Under this deal, tens of millions of dollars will be paid out to the Northern Territories. Yukon's health minister says that territory will get about $100 million, while in Nunavut, the payout will be closer to $95 million.
The plan will not only provide compensation to those harmed by tobacco, but also ease the burden on our healthcare systems. So things that could flow out of this would include research, things like improving cancer treatments.
It's not yet clear how much the NWT will be getting. Historically, the 3 territories have reported the highest smoking rates in the country.
This is a proposed corridor for multiple pipeline projects.
You're crossing our territory on 2 ends of your pipeline. Who gave you permission?
Pipelines break of the pipelines would destroy the water and everything in it.
They got to come through us first.
This is an immediate evacuation order for all Coastal GasLink employees. I feel like we are at war. It's just all been building up to this point.
Argenta on The Passionate Eye. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Release him.
Why?
Well, I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
This man is actually in my custody.
What did he do?
Well,
Did you hear that? I'm being charged with,
This ranch isn't going down. Not on my watch.
A private college in Yellowknife was denied accreditation last spring. It's called the College of Northern Canada, and it isn't accredited partially due to not showing an understanding of Northern Canada. That's according to the rejection letter issued by the NWT government to the college. CBC News obtained the letter using an access to information request. The CBC's Luke Carroll went through that document, and he joins me now with more. So Luke, why don't you start by telling me what it means to become accredited?
Yeah, so accreditation is essentially a quality assurance process that the NWT has for education centers. So provinces and territories are responsible for their own accreditation standards. And so a prospective college, in this case, can apply for accreditation by sending a plan with what it would offer. The public gets a chance to view it and share feedback. And the territory will also get experts to give them feedback. So in this case with the College of Northern Canada, the territory got both academic subject matter experts and industry experts to look at the applications. And a large part of why the NWT denied accreditation was from their findings, Megan.
So what did the experts find then?
So a big one was a lack of Northern knowledge. So one comment reads, quote, "Northern content is the theme of the program, but there are no Indigenous instructors and no Indigenous knowledge incorporated in the program." So this lack of knowledge, of Northern knowledge, was also reflected in other ways. One of which was that the application had a lot of material that was just cut and pasted from British Columbia documents. There was no editing to correct it for the NWT. So an example of this is they plan to follow the BC Council of Admissions and Transfers, and not the NWT's comparable regulations on this. Another was that they were unsure how the college's logistics programs connects to the NWT labor market. The application for global logistics also didn't include graduation requirements for students. And the college was asked for an example of what, quote, cutting-edge logistics practices it would offer. And in the global tourism program, there weren't even enough instruction hours scheduled. The college also planned to use outdated material to study tourism, including one textbook that was published pre-COVID. The review also called the college out for planning to admit over the legal number of international students. There were also a lot of claims that the college was making that the reviewer pushed back on, like that it would set students up with co-op placements. But there was no mention of who these co-ops would be with, Megan.
Were there any positive comments in the document, Luke?
Yeah, there was a couple positive comments in there. The rejection letter mentions that the academic reviewers had some positive feedback for the logistics program. One of the comments was that, quote, foundational understanding of the course is concrete, and the graduates of the course who meet all the necessary criteria will find themselves standing in line with industry standards and peers alike. So there were two other similar comments to that. Now, the logistics industry experts did not have positive things to say, and that is what ultimately led to the rejection. And the overwhelming majority of the comments in these documents here were negative, Megan.
What did the college have to say about all of this?
Yeah, so I reached out to the president and the vice president and never got a response. The document, however, does say that the college is allowed to reapply for accreditation after addressing the concerns that were highlighted. And it's worth noting that the college is offering non-accredited courses.
Okay, thanks for all your work on this, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
Recent technological advances helped expand Google Translate to hundreds of new languages. And one of those is the first Canadian Indigenous language on the platform. Carl Cardinal has the story.
Inuktitut is now the first Canadian Indigenous language available on Google Translate. Isaac Caswell is a senior engineer at Google Translate. He says the company felt responsible for elevating voices of communities that have historically been overlooked. Caswell says they first choose Inuktitut because their AI technology is able to find a lot of reference online. He says that's what makes the translation possible.
In this case, for Indigenous languages, the harder thing tends to be whether it's technologically feasible, because there's usually not very much data out there. Whereas Inuktitut, or Inuktitut more generally speaking, does have a lot more data, in part because the community is larger and more online, but also in part because it's used in governmental proceedings in Nunavut and other things like this, so there is more text online.
Google approached Inuit Tapiri Kanatami to collaborate on this project. ITK shared their knowledge and tested the accuracy of some translation. Jessie Fraser is the ITK Senior Communications Advisor. She says they advised Google to choose Inuktitut over Inuktitut. Fraser says it's an umbrella for all dialect and will help the technology in getting more data online. She added that perhaps in the future, a user will be able to choose a specific dialect.
It's an imperfect tool, but it can be used in positive ways. I never grew up seeing my language on Google or Facebook or things like that, so I'm really excited for what it means to Inuit today and for younger Inuit who will now grow up with being able to see their language on such a huge platform as Google.
Inuktitut translation is now available on the platform. You can do the translation with syllabic or Roman orthography. Carl Cardinal, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Someone broke into the First Steps daycare in Iqaluit, and it's actually becoming a common occurrence. This is the fourth time the daycare has been broken into this month. Since the break-in started, the daycare has lost about $6,000 worth of items, including food and snacks for the children. The board says they're now buying more food out of their own pockets.
With the food insecurity, them taking the food is really hard on the daycare, because we try to give the kids as much food as possible during the day in case they're not getting as much at home. But with them taking all the food, it's harder to fulfill that.
Kilbuck says the daycare has added extra security measures. The break-ins are under investigation. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a program focused on giving Indigenous youth in Canada a chance to make cultural connections with Maori in New Zealand, but it left them feeling scammed. CBC Indigenous reporter Jackie McKay explains.
It promised an immersive experience, living and working in Maori communities. But instead, participants were left short on cultural opportunities and cash.
I do feel scammed.
I was just really disappointed by the whole experience.
The companies that ran the program, Go International out of Vancouver and New Zealand's Genza. Go International charged $4,200 for the program. Participants had to pay for flights, insurance, and visas. Promises included taking part in a Maori welcome and visiting a Maori village.
There's no way we got what the itinerary said or anything like that.
Bear said the deep cultural experiences were nothing more than tourist hotspots.
It wasn't what I had expected, because, when you talk about culture and stuff, it's not a tourist thing.
After the first 2 weeks, things got worse. The group ended up at a remote lodge with no way to leave and working for room and board.
It's less than ideal. We're not getting paid.
Next, they expected to be on a Kiwi farm, but it was a packing plant.
You would just stare at this machine for 12 hours.
Some of those shifts were overnight.
Back to work. Cheryl and I were working on the grading machine, and we were both got so dizzy that we both ended up throwing up.
Their rooms were bug and rodent infested too.
There was a mouse in our bedroom, and I was so terrified to sleep that night.
In response to a concerned parent, Go International said the group confused harmless clicker bugs with rodent droppings. The program promised they would make 750 New Zealand dollars a week, about 636 Canadian. But pay stubs show an average of 338 New Zealand dollars. That's about 282 Canadian. Hundreds were deducted each check for taxes, rent, and transportation. In a statement, Genza said errors were made in preparing participants, and consultations with Maori were inadequate. In an email, Go International said the high standards it set for the trip were not met, and that while most of the participants had the experience that we had hoped for, some did not. Many people left the program early, like Stevens. She's still in New Zealand.
I just think I wasted a lot of money on that program to not receive what I asked for and what was like guaranteed.
The people we spoke to asked for a full refund. Go International offered $600 and confirmed the program has been discontinued. Jackie McKay for CBC Indigenous in Vancouver.
Iqaluit Public Health is holding a walk-in vaccine clinic for the next 3 weeks. Shots for COVID-19 and the flu will be made available for eligible Nunavummiut over 6 months old. Walk-in appointments will be available Monday to Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and from 1 to 4:30 p.m. The clinic will also be open on Saturdays between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/North. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a great weekend.
Oh, wait, are we allowed to touch, like, no, it's fine, yeah.
In Australia, a unique experiment
How come you guys don't have a table?
We do have a table.
is about to unfold. A school swap that brings together 12 students from very different cultures and religions.
You do what you want to do, it's fine, I'll do me.
My fear is, instead of building bridges, they'll end up blowing them.
I want to be seen as me and not my hijab, not scary terrorists or something like that.
You're going to be introduced to a new world. Stand back.
They're making more money than they have ever made in the history of the music business.
We have generation after generation of us not seeing a fair piece of the pie.
How do we keep the money from Black music in Black people's hands?
I think my dislike is warranted.
What was Amy calling it? The beef wars?
You don't tell me anything. You don't share your feelings, open up about your past.
It's not that simple, Amy.
Heart is pounding. This is very hard to do.
We both know it's not an easy task.
The Great Canadian Baking Show. Watch free on CBC Gem.
They reported a shipment of cocaine stolen 2 weeks ago.
We all have our vices, Detective.
Oh, you find that surprising?
Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.